The knock came at 8 in the morning, sharp and insistent against the hollow door of Unit 2B. Garrett Sullivan stood in the narrow galley kitchen of his Westwood Apartments unit, staring at the closed door across 12 feet of worn carpet, his coffee mug frozen halfway to his lips. Through the peephole, 5 black Mercedes SUVs lined the cracked asphalt of the parking lot like a motorcade, their chrome catching early Detroit sun. His pulse hammered. Repo men didn't drive Mercedes. Bill collectors didn't travel in packs. The knock came again, somehow both patient and commanding. Garrett set down his mug and crossed the distance. The cheap deadbolt clicked. Cool November air rushed in as he pulled the door open, and there she stood, the woman from the bus stop, the one who'd counted crumpled bills with shaking hands 12 hours ago. But transformed. The worn clothes had been replaced by a charcoal suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her hair, which had hung in disheveled waves around her tear-streaked face, now sat in a perfect chignon. People in expensive suits flanked her, holding tablets and briefcases, their faces professionally neutral. "Hello, Garrett." Her voice carried the same educated Midwestern accent, but stripped of desperation, filled instead with quiet authority that came from boardrooms and corner offices. "We need to talk." His brain refused to process. Behind him, small footsteps padded across carpet. Avery appeared in her pajamas, blonde hair sticking up in sleep musk tangles, 7 years old and already too perceptive. "Daddy, who are those people?" The woman's expression softened instantly, the CEO mask cracking. She crouched to Avery's eye level without waiting for permission. "Hi, sweetheart. I'm Victoria, a friend of your dad's." Avery's eyes went wide, taking in the cars, the suits, the woman who looked like she'd stepped from a magazine. "You have really pretty cars. Are you a princess?" 24 hours earlier, the supervisor's office at Riverside Manufacturing smelled like burnt coffee and machine oil, familiar scents that usually meant safety, routine, a paycheck. Garrett sat across from Dale Miller, watching the older man slide termination papers across the metal desk with careful movements of someone who'd done this before, who'd learned to keep his face neutral while destroying livelihoods. "We have witnesses who saw you take the equipment, Sullivan. Multiple witnesses." The words landed like physical blows. Garrett's hands gripped the armrests of the plastic chair, knuckles white. "I never touched that equipment. This is insane. Who's accusing me?" Miller glanced at his computer screen, mouth tight. Jake Patterson and Tina Brooks both gave statements. Security footage from that section is corrupted, some kind of malfunction, without video evidence to contradict their accounts. "So you're believing them over me." Two people who've been dating for 3 months. The supervisor's expression didn't change. He'd already decided, probably hours ago, this meeting was just paperwork. "Your final paycheck is being held pending completion of our internal investigation. You'll need to surrender your badge and company property." The walk from office to locker took 90 seconds. Long enough for Jake Patterson to cow out his eye from across the factory floor, offering a small, satisfied smirk that confirmed everything. Tina stood beside him, refusing to meet Garrett's gaze. They'd needed a scapegoat for their own theft, probably selling equipment piece by piece to cover debts or habits. And he'd been convenient. The single dad who kept to himself, who didn't join Friday bar runs, who had no allies to defend him. Outside, November wind cut through his work jacket. His truck sat in the employee lot, a 15-year-old Ford with rust eating through wheel wells. The engine turned over on the 3rd try. As he pulled onto the access road, his phone buzzed. He didn't need to look. The numbers were already burned into his mind from this morning. $18.47. Rent was due in 5 days. $950. The utilities were 2 weeks overdue. Avery's soccer registration sat unpaid, $30 short of the $75 required. The electricity bill, the water bill, the stack of medical bills from Sarah's final hospital stay 3 years ago, all of it waited in neat pile on the kitchen counter, a paper monument to failure. The apartment complex emerged from gray afternoon, 2 stories of faded brick and sagging balconies. Eleanor Walsh opened her door as Garrett climbed exterior stairs. The elderly woman had lived in Unit 2A for 20 years, a widow with kind eyes and endless patience for the struggling single father next door. Avery's watching cartoons. Fed her some chicken nuggets about an hour ago. No rush picking her up. Garrett's throat tightened. Eleanor never charged for babysitting, never mentioned how many times she'd fed his daughter, never made him feel small for needing help. Thank you, I'll come get her in a bit. Inside his own unit, silence pressed down. He stood at the kitchen counter, staring at bills, doing math he'd done 100 times. $18 could buy 2 boxes of cereal and bread, or milk and pasta, or bus fare for a week of job hunting. It couldn't buy anything meaningful, couldn't solve real problems, but it was all that stood between tonight and hunger. On the refrigerator, Avery's latest drawing hung beneath a magnet shaped like a sunflower. "Daddy at work," she'd written in careful letters across the top. The crayon figure wore a smile and stood beneath bright yellow sun. Garrett had to look away. Sarah's photographs sat on the small bookshelf near the television. Frozen at 32, blonde hair catching sunlight, that smile that had made him believe good things could happen to ordinary people. 3 years since the accident on I-94. 3 years since the hospital phone call. 3 years of trying to be enough for a daughter who deserves so much more. The memory of Sarah's final words in that sterile hospital room carved through him. "Take care of our girl. Don't let her forget what love looks like. Promise me." He'd promised. But keeping that promise on $18 felt impossible. Evening fell. Garrett picked up Avery from Eleanor's, accepted her excited chatter about cartoons, helped with simple homework from 2nd grade. They ate boxed macaroni and cheese, store brand that came for $1. Avery talked about friend Madison and boy Tyler, who pulled girls' hair in upcoming soccer game Saturday against the Ferndale team. "Coach says I'm getting really good at defense, Daddy. Can you come watch?" His chest ached. "Of course, sweetie. I wouldn't miss it." After Avery went to bed, Garrett sat at the kitchen table with bills and calculator, running scenarios that all ended the same way. He could ask for rent extension, but he'd already done that twice this year. He could pawn something, but he'd already sold anything worth selling. He could ask Eleanor for a loan, but she lived on fixed income and had already given more than anyone should. The walls seemed to close in, the space becoming a cell, a trap, a monument to his inability to provide. Around 9:30, he pulled on his jacket and walked to the 24-hour market 6 blocks away. November night had teeth, wind slicing down empty streets, carrying smell of distant factories and promise of early snow. His plan involved buying whatever $18 could stretch furthest and praying his credit card might work for small charges before the bank noticed. The bus stop on Washington Avenue appeared beneath a flickering streetlight, bench spray painted with gang tags and carved initials. Garrett dropped onto cold metal, exhausted in ways that transcended physical tiredness. This bone-deep weariness came from months of barely surviving, of making impossible choices, of watching his daughter draw pictures of happy families while living in one-bedroom apartment with peeling wallpaper. A figure approached from the left, heels clicking on concrete. Garrett barely registered her presence until she sat on the far end of the bench. Then he heard it, the sound of someone trying very hard not to fall apart. Short, sharp breaths, the rustle of bills being counted with shaking hands. He glanced over. The woman appeared late 30s, dressed in clothes that had probably looked professional that morning, but now carried wear of a long, terrible day. Dark slacks, cream-colored blouse with coffee stain on sleeve, blazer bunched awkwardly around shoulders. Her hands trembled as she counted money again. $12. Some change. Her face crumpled for just a moment before she forced it back into something resembling composure. "Excuse me." Her voice cracked around edges, formal education fighting raw desperation. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but do you have any change? I'm short for bus fare." Garrett looked at her properly then. Tear tracks cut through expensive makeup, mascara smudged beneath red-rimmed eyes, and on her wrist, catching streetlight, a watch that even his inexperienced eye recognized as worth thousands. Cardio, the distinctive rectangular face unmistakable. The contradiction sent warning signals. Rich woman begging for bus fare, expensive watch but no money. Possible con artist, possible setup, but her eyes told different story. He'd seen that look in his own mirror too many times. The glazed, hollowed-out expression of someone who'd lost everything and couldn't process the speed of fall. Garrett pulled out his wallet. The $18 sat folded inside, bills softened by warmth of his pocket. Everything he had, everything between Avery's breakfast tomorrow and empty stomachs. His hand hovered. The rational voice screamed at him to stop, to think, to protect what little remained. $18 meant cereal for Avery, milk for her breakfast, bread for sandwiches. If he gave it away, she'd ask why there was no food, and he'd have to lie again. But Sarah's voice whispered through rational arguments, a memory from years ago when they'd stopped to help stranded motorists in rain. Kindness costs nothing but means everything. We help because that's who we are. The woman counted her money again, hands shaking harder. $12.38. Bus fare after 10 p.m. to northern suburbs was $15. She was trapped here in this neighborhood that wasn't safe after dark. A woman alone who'd already had what looked like the worst night of her life. Garrett held out the bills. Here, take it. She stared at money like he'd offered lifeline in shipwreck. I can't. That's too much. I just need a few dollars. Please, the word came out rougher than intended. Just take it. Her fingers closed around Bill's, and for a moment he thought she might break completely. Instead, she drew shaky breath, forcing control back. I'm Victoria. I don't even know what to say. Thank you doesn't feel like enough. It's okay. Bad nights happen to everyone. She wiped at her eyes, smudging mascara further. You don't understand. Tonight I lost everything. My car bar, my phone, my wallet. Someone took it all. And then I was just standing on street corner, and I realized I couldn't even get home. Couldn't call anyone. The bus appeared at the end of the block, headlights cutting through dark. Victoria stood quickly, still clutching money. How do I find you? To pay you back? Garrett shook his head. Something in her desperation resonated too deeply, reflected too clearly his own situation. Don't worry about it. If fate wants us to meet again, we will. She hesitated on steps, turning to look at him through closing doors. The bus pulled away, taillights disappearing down Washington Avenue, and Garrett was alone again under broken streetlight. The walk home stretched 4 miles through industrial neighborhoods and empty lots. His steel-toed work boots rubbed blisters on both heels. His empty stomach had moved past growling into hollow, dizzy ache. But something else moved through him too, something he couldn't quite name. For first time in months, he'd made choice that wasn't about survival or damage control. He'd helped someone because it was right. Consequences be damned. Sarah would have been proud. Back at Westwood Apartments, lights in Eleanor's window had gone dark. Garrett let himself into his unit as quietly as possible. Avery's door stood open a crack, and he paused to watch her sleep. She kicked off blankets again, curled on side with one hand tucked under cheek. Sarah's sleeping position exactly. I'm sorry, baby, he whispered. I'm trying so hard. He spent rest of night at kitchen table, staring at bills he couldn't pay, wondering what came next. The knock came at 8 in morning. Victoria Brennan stepped into the small apartment with careful awareness of someone entering space she'd been in before, lifetimes ago. Her security team remained in hallway, 5 people in dark suits who'd followed her up exterior stairs, who now waited with patience of professionals accustomed to strange assignments. Only one person entered behind her, a silver-haired man in his 50s whose expression radiated disapproval. Garrett gestured toward threadbare couch. Victoria sat with perfect posture, crossing legs at ankle, picture of corporate professionalism transplanted into poverty. Avery, sweetheart, Garrett's voice came steadier than he felt. Why don't you go play in your room for a few minutes? The grown-ups need to talk. His daughter's eyes moved between her father and elegant stranger, calculating with 7-year-old wisdom that something important was happening. But she obeyed, disappearing down short hallway with one last backward glance. The silver-haired man remained standing near door, arms crossed. His gaze moved over apartment with clinical assessment, cataloging poverty, struggling, desperation that hung in air like cigarette smoke. Victoria pulled slim leather portfolio from her bag. I know this must seem strange, Garrett, showing up like this, but I needed to find you, and you left me breadcrumbs. His confusion must have shown. The pay stub. When you handed me money last night, it was folded with your pay stub from factory. I saw your name and address. Garrett's stomach dropped. He hadn't realized. Hadn't checked what was in wallet when he'd pulled out bills. Who are you? My name is Victoria Brennan. I'm CEO and founder of Lancaster and Associates Marketing. We have offices on 17th floor of Fisher Building downtown. Last year, our firm generated just under $15 million in revenue. We employ 53 people across multiple divisions. The words didn't connect to reality. CEO, 15 million. This woman who'd been counting change was shaking hands 12 hours ago, owned company that made more money in month than Garrett would see in lifetime. I don't understand. Last night you needed bus fare. Victoria's professional mask flickered, revealing something raw underneath. Last night, someone very close to me orchestrated elaborate setup. My assistant, Dominic Fletcher, insisted I take his car when mine was in shop. Lexus, supposedly gesture of kindness. I had client dinner downtown at Caucus Club. When I came out at 9:15, car was gone. My purse was inside, phone, wallet, credit cards, house keys, everything. She paused, jaw tight. Dominic immediately reported car stolen and offered to let me stay at his house in Bloomfield Hills. Very concerned, very helpful, but something felt wrong. I walked to nearest bus stop instead. This morning, after I finally got home using spare key I keep in garage, I checked my accounts. Someone had tried to use my credit cards at 3 different locations within 30 minutes. Then they stopped. The silver-haired man spoke for first time, voice carrying clipped efficiency of someone who dealt in numbers and facts. Someone wanted Miss Brennan vulnerable, stranded, discredited. Garrett's head spun. This wasn't his world. Corporate intrigue, staged robberies, employees betraying bosses. I still don't understand why you're here, why you're telling me this. Victoria leaned forward slightly, and for first time since entering apartment, her CEO facade cracked completely. Because when I had nothing, when I was just another person stranded and desperate, you gave me everything you had, no questions, no conditions. It wasn't, it was. Her voice sharpened. I did research on you, Garrett. I know you lost your wife 3 years ago. I know you were raising Avery alone. I know you were fired yesterday from Riverside Manufacturing on false charges. Jake Patterson and Tina Brooks framed you. I know you worked as bookkeeper at Hartwell & Sons before company went bankrupt in 2019. The invasion felt total. Garrett's hands curled into fists. You had no right. I had every right. Victoria's tone brooked no argument. When I'm about to trust someone, I do due diligence. And everything I found tells me you're exactly what I need. She opened portfolio, revealing single sheet with company letterhead. I'm offering you position in financial operations at Lancaster and Associates. The title is Financial Operations Coordinator. Starting salary is $45,000 annually, with full benefits, health insurance for you and Avery, dental, vision, 401k matching. The numbers didn't process. 45,000. Health insurance, benefits. But that's not what I really need from you. Victoria's gaze locked onto his. Someone inside my company is stealing. Someone is trying to destroy what I've built. I hired private investigator, Daniel Harper, former Detroit PD, best in city. He's been working 3 weeks and found almost nothing. Whoever is behind this has access and knowledge to block professional investigation. So I want someone they won't see coming. Someone with accounting skills but no corporate background. Someone who can review financial records without raising suspicion. The silver-haired man's voice cut through. This is mistake, Victoria. We need trained professionals, not... He gestured vaguely at Garrett, at apartment. This is my decision, Gregory. She turned back to Garrett. In business, everyone can be bought. Loyalty is transactional. People stay until someone offers more money. But someone who gives when they have nothing, someone who helps with no expectation of return, that person can't be purchased. That's who I need. Garrett looked at Avery's closed door, at drawing on refrigerator, at possibility of health insurance and stability. Yes, he heard himself say, I'll do it. Victoria stood, extending hand for professional handshake. Her grip was firm, practiced. Good. You start Monday morning, 8 a.m., Fisher Building, 17th floor. Monday morning brought anxious energy that made Garrett's hands shake as he knotted thrift store tie. The suit had cost $25 at Salvation Army, navy blue, slightly too big in shoulders. His reflection looked like child playing dress-up, imposter headed somewhere he didn't belong. The bus ride downtown took 45 minutes. Fisher Building rose 28 stories, Art Deco monument from Detroit's golden age. Garrett stood on sidewalk for full minute, staring up, before forcing himself through revolving doors. Lancaster and Associates occupied entire 17th floor. Glass doors opened onto reception area that screamed money. Leather furniture, abstract art, receptionist who could have been model. She smiled with professional warmth. You must be Garrett Sullivan. Jennifer Blake is expecting you. The HR director appeared from side hallway, blonde and efficient. Jennifer Blake extended hand with firm grip. Welcome to Lancaster, Mr. Sullivan. Let's get you set up. The next hour blurred through paperwork. Jennifer explained structure with practiced ease. Marketing occupied main floor, financial operations sat on 15, creative services on 16. Victoria's office anchored corner, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown. You'll be working primarily with expense reconciliation. We're preparing for annual audit, and we have about 18 months of backlogged reports that need review. Your supervisor will be Gregory Caldwell, our CFO, though you'll report progress directly to Miss Brennan weekly. Floor 15 was quieter, more utilitarian. Rows of cubicles, ambient sound of keyboards, and muted phone conversations. Jennifer led him to small cube near window, better than expected. Desktop computer, dual monitors, filing cabinets stuffed with folders. These are expense reports going back to January of last year. Your job is to verify each one against purchase orders and invoices, categorize expenses appropriately, and flag anything unusual. She left him with login credentials. Garrett settled into chair, staring at monitors, stack of folders, corporate world he'd somehow fallen into. The work came back easily. Cross-reference expense report with attached receipt, verify vendor name, check purchase order number. Enter data into system. Around 10:30, someone appeared at cubicle entrance. Garrett looked up to find man in early 30s, handsome and polished way that suggested gym memberships and salon haircuts, wearing smile that reached eyes but somehow felt calculated. You must be Garrett. I'm Dominic Fletcher, Miss Brennan's assistant and chief operating officer. He extended hand with easy charm. Victoria told everyone about what you did for her. That was incredibly generous. The handshake lasted beat too long. Dominic's eyes moved over Garrett with assessment that felt invasive. Just did what anyone would do? Most people would have walked past, but that's beside point. You're here now, part of Lancaster family. Dominic gestured toward break room. Coffee? I was just heading that way. They walked together, Dominic keeping steady stream of seemingly casual questions. How was Garrett settling in? What did he think of office? How old was his daughter? What part of city did he live in? Each question felt friendly on surface, but probing underneath. In break room, Dominic prepared coffee with practiced efficiency, somehow knowing exactly how Garrett took it. Cream, no sugar, despite never asking. Victoria mentioned you worked in accounting before. Must be nice to get back to work you actually know, right? Factory work, that's rough. The comparison felt patronizing. Dominic had probably worked construction one summer in college for beer money. Garrett had worked factory floor 2 years as matter of survival. They chatted for another 10 minutes before Dominic glanced at his watch. Rolex, Garrett noticed, and excused himself. Walking back to cubicle, Garrett's instincts screamed warnings. Something about Dominic Fletcher felt wrong. Too friendly, too interested. Lunch arrived without event. Garrett ate sandwich he'd packed at his desk, reviewing expense reports. The pattern started emerging around 1 p.m. Dominic Fletcher's expenses appeared with regularity, client dinners, transportation costs, vendor payments. But unlike every other senior staff member, Dominic's reports lacked secondary approval. System showed automatic authorization, no oversight. Garrett pulled up approval matrix. All expenses over $500 required CFO sign-off. But Dominic's expenses bypassed both requirements. He made notes in personal notebook, careful not to save anything to work computer. A vendor name caught attention: Apex Marketing Solutions. The invoices were small, never more than 1,500, but consistent, one or two every month for past 18 months. He searched for company, no website, no social media, nothing. He dug deeper into vendor files. Apex Marketing Solutions listed P.O. Box in Grand Rapids. No phone number. The tax ID number was registered, but cross-reference with IRS database came back negative. Ghost company. Garrett's pulse quickened. He exported Apex invoices to phone camera, careful to keep screen angled away. $43,000 over 18 months, paid to company that didn't exist, with Dominic Fletcher's signature on every invoice. Around 3 p.m., another visitor appeared. The man-filled, cubicle entrance, 6'2", expensive suit straining across broad shoulders. Kevin Lawson, VP of Marketing, looked down at Garrett with obvious assessment. Sullivan, right? The guy who helped Victoria. His tone made it sound less like compliment. What exactly are your qualifications for this position? The question hung between them, loaded with class prejudice. Associate degree in accounting from Macomb Community College. 5 years experience at Hartwell and Sons before they closed. Community college. Kevin's smile didn't reach eyes. I see. Well, welcome aboard. I'm sure you'll find learning curve here is steep. He left without waiting for response. Garrett stared at empty cubicle entrance, anger and humiliation burning through chest. The afternoon crawled by. Around 4:30, most of floor started packing up. At 5:15, his phone buzzed with text from unknown number. Miss Brennan would like to see you before you leave. 17th floor, corner office. Victoria's office sat behind glass walls at far corner, visible from most of floor. Her assistant's desk sat empty. Garrett knocked on doorframe. Victoria glanced up from laptop, gesturing him in. Her office reflected understated wealth, modern furniture, original art, floor-to-ceiling windows showing Detroit's skyline. How was day one? Garrett sank into visitor chair. Overwhelming. Good, but overwhelming. Find anything interesting? He hesitated, then pulled out phone and showed her photos of Apex Marketing Solutions invoices. Dominic Fletcher's expenses go through without secondary approval. I found vendor, Apex Marketing Solutions, that doesn't appear to exist outside our database. $43,000 in payments over 18 months. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Validation, maybe, or confirmation of suspicions. Dominic came to see you today. It wasn't question. Garrett nodded. Brought me coffee, asked a lot of casual questions that didn't feel casual. He's gathering intelligence, trying to figure out if you're a threat. Am I? Victoria's lips curved into something that wasn't quite smile. I hope so. What else did you notice? Kevin Lawson made it clear I don't belong here. Asked about qualifications in a way that suggested community college degrees aren't real credentials. Kevin's ambitious and insecure. Don't let him get to you. She pulled up something on laptop, turning screen. Financial statements, expense reports, bank transactions. Daniel Harper, my private investigator, has been working this 3 weeks. He found evidence of offshore accounts tied to Dominic, Cayman Islands. Can't access them legally, but they exist. But every time Daniel gets close to finding money trail, something blocks him. Files go missing, witnesses become unavailable. Someone with internal access. Exactly, which is why you're valuable. You're not in their sightline yet. To Dominic, you're just charity case I hired out of guilt. To Kevin, you're barely worth noticing. To Gregory, she paused. Gregory's protective. He helped me build Lancaster from nothing. But lately he's been resistant, questioning my decisions. Victoria turned back to face him. Keep doing what you're doing. Review expense reports chronologically. Map patterns. Look for anything unusual. Meet with me every Monday at this time. And Garrett, trust no one. Not Dominic, not Kevin, not even Gregory. Until we know who's behind this, everyone is suspect. The weight settled over him. She was asking him to navigate world of corporate politics and potential crime with no training, nothing but basic accounting skills. I can do that. I know you can. That's why you're here. The bus ride home felt different. Garrett stared out window at passing neighborhoods, mind churning. He'd spent years in survival mode, focused entirely on making it through each day. This existed outside any experience he could draw on. At Westwood Apartments, Eleanor met him on stairs. Avery's been talking about your new job all afternoon. How'd it go? Better than expected. Scary, but good. Avery ambushed him moment he opened door, launching into rapid-fire interrogation. He answered patiently, watching her excitement, feeling weight of responsibility. This job had to work. After dinner and homework and bedtime stories, Garrett retreated to kitchen table with laptop. He spent 2 hours researching Apex marketing solutions, finding nothing. No business registration in Michigan, no federal contracts, address in Grand Rapids corresponded to mailboxes, etc., that rented P.O. boxes. He searched for Dominic Fletcher next, finding polished LinkedIn profile, mentions in marketing articles, Twitter account, nothing suspicious. But offshore accounts Daniel Harper had found suggested layers beneath surface. Around midnight, Garrett closed laptop and stared at stack of bills. In 2 weeks, first paycheck would arrive. Health insurance would kick in. Pressure crushing him for 2 years would ease. But cost of that relief was wading into situation he didn't fully understand. He thought of Sarah, of promise he'd made, of drawing Avery had taped to refrigerator, showing him an office with sun overhead. He thought of Victoria Brennan giving him chance no one else would. He'd figure it out. He had to. Tuesday passed similarly, Garrett building understanding of Lancaster's financial structure. Wednesday brought his first encounter with Gregory Caldwell beyond that first morning in his apartment. The CFO appeared at Garrett's cubicle around 2 p.m., standing at entrance with arms crossed. "Sullivan, walk with me." It wasn't request. Garrett saved work and followed Gregory to stairwell, door closing with echoing thud. The CFO descended one flight before stopping on landing between floors. "I don't know what game you're playing, Sullivan." Gregory's voice echoed off concrete. "But let me be clear. I've been with Victoria since beginning. I helped structure her first business loan. I built financial foundation that allowed Lancaster to grow. I was there when she had nothing." Garrett kept expression neutral. "Some of us earned our place here through years of work and loyalty. We built this company brick by brick, and then you show up, factory worker with sob story and moment of charity, and suddenly you have Victoria's ear, access to confidential data, position you're not qualified for." Gregory stepped closer using height advantage. "If you hurt this company, if you take advantage of Victoria's misplaced trust, I will destroy you. I have resources you can't imagine, connections throughout Detroit's business community. I can make sure you never work anywhere again." Garrett's jaw tightened, forcing himself to stay calm. "I'm not trying to hurt anyone, Mr. Caldwell. I just need job to support my daughter." "Then do your job and stay in your lane. Don't presume to investigate people who've been here for years. You're temporary, Sullivan. Victoria will realize her mistake, and you'll be gone. Remember that." Gregory brushed past him, ascending stairs, leaving Garrett alone on landing. The CFO's words echoed, warning wrapped in barely concealed threat. But beneath intimidation, Garrett heard something else. Fear. Gregory was afraid. That evening, sitting at Victoria's desk for weekly update, Garrett relayed stairwell encounter. She listened without interrupting, expression growing colder. "Gregory's always been protective, but this is different." She stared out window at darkening city. "He's never threatened employee before. Either he's genuinely worried I'm making mistake, or he has reason to want you gone. We have $340,000 in trace theft potential," Garrett said carefully. "Pattern escalated 8 months ago. Something changed." Victoria nodded slowly. "External audit was scheduled then. Someone knew scrutiny was coming." They sat in silence, possibilities multiplying. Somewhere in Lancaster's glass tower, people smiled and shook hands while systematically destroying company from within. Garrett went home to Avery, to Eleanor's kindness, to drawing on refrigerator. He made dinner, read bedtime stories, then returned to laptop and continued building case in shadows. The third week at Lancaster brought rhythm, rising before dawn, arriving by 7:30 to work uninterrupted. The expense reports stretched back further than initially indicated. He attacked them chronologically, building spreadsheets on personal laptop each night. Thursday of week 3, his computer wouldn't boot. Screen flickered with corrupted data, error messages cascading. Brian Foster from IT arrived within minutes. This is weird. Brian's fingers flew across keyboard. You've got targeted malware, sophisticated stuff. Someone specifically wanted into your system. Garrett's stomach dropped. Can you recover files? Everything's corrupted. Whatever was on here is gone. Brian frowned at screen. This shouldn't have gotten past our firewall. For something this complex to penetrate, someone would need internal network access. The implication hung between them. Garrett had been researching financial irregularities. Someone had noticed. How long to get me operational? I can re-image drive, have you back up this afternoon. But whatever you had, gone. Garrett nodded, keeping expression neutral despite adrenaline spike. They didn't know about personal laptop, didn't know about phone photos. The attack revealed fear, confirmed his investigation had rattled someone, but they'd tipped their hand too early. Brian worked for 2 hours. Garrett spent time reviewing hard copy expense reports, maintaining appearance of someone whose work had been destroyed. Kevin Lawson walked past twice, glancing with barely concealed satisfaction. Gregory Caldwell appeared once, standing at entrance without speaking. Dominic stopped by around lunch carrying 2 sandwiches. Heard about your computer troubles. Brought you something to eat. The gesture felt calculated. Garrett accepted sandwich with appropriate gratitude, watching Dominic settle into visitor chair. It says it was malware, some kind of targeted attack. Dominic's expression conveyed perfect sympathy. Did you lose much? Everything I'd been working on. 3 weeks of reconciliation gone. That's brutal, but hey, at least it happened early, right? Dominic unwrapped his own sandwich. You settling in okay otherwise? The conversation danced around edges, Dominic probing for reactions. Garrett played his part, frustrated but not suspicious, overwhelmed but determined. After Dominic left, Garrett stared at sandwich, appetite gone. The message was clear. We can reach you, we're watching, back off. But they'd miscalculated. The attack proved vulnerability, suggested panic. Friday afternoon brought text, Daniel Harper. Coffee tomorrow morning. Astoria Bakery, 9 a.m. Victoria will be there. Saturday morning, Garrett arrived early at bakery in Corktown. Victoria appeared first, dressed casually in jeans and sweater. Daniel Harper followed, late 40s, solid build, weathered face of ex-cop turned private investigator. Victoria made introductions. Daniel ordered black coffee, then pulled out leather folder. I've hit walls everywhere. His voice carried flat honesty of bad news. Dominic Fletcher's official records are immaculate, but I've found offshore accounts, 2 of them, Cayman Islands, opened 26 months ago. Can't access balances legally, but they're active. He spread photos across table, bank documents, wire transfers, corporate filings. The accounts are held through Shell Corporation, Apex Holdings Limited. Different from Apex Marketing Solutions you found, but same naming pattern. Garrett leaned forward. Can you trace who controls Apex Holdings? That's where I keep hitting walls. Every time I get close, something happens. Files go missing. Witnesses become unavailable. Daniel's frustration showed. Someone's always one step ahead. Victoria's jaw tightened. Someone with resources and connections. Someone with access to information about my investigation. Daniel met her gaze. Think there's a leak. Someone inside Lancaster feeding information. Garrett shared his findings. Ghost companies, 78,000 in false invoices, computer attack. Victoria listened, expression growing colder. Dominic's obvious suspect, Daniel continued, but offshore accounts were opened 2 years ago. Your expense reports show embezzlement started 18 months ago. That's 6-month gap. Or someone else opened those accounts and Dominic came later. Victoria finished thought. A partnership. The possibilities shifted everything. Not single bad actor, but conspiracy. Multiple people coordinating. Layers more complex than simple embezzlement. Garrett pulled out phone. I need more time to dig deeper. Pattern escalated 8 months ago. Amounts increased. Frequency went up. Daniel nodded. That matches when external audit was scheduled. Someone knew scrutiny was coming. But who knew about audit that early? Victoria's question hung unanswered. Board members, senior leadership, accounting staff, they sat in silence. Somewhere in Lancaster's tower, one or more people systematically destroyed company from within, and they knew someone was investigating. Garrett thought about Gregory's stairwell warning, Kevin's dismissive contempt, Dominic's calculated friendliness. Any could be involved. All could be innocent. The uncertainty was its own weapon. After meeting, Garrett went home to find Avery practicing soccer in parking lot. She ran to him, excitement bubbling over about upcoming practice. Can we go to park, please? They spent afternoon at Roosevelt Park, Avery kicking ball while Garrett watched from bench. The normalcy felt surreal after corporate intrigue, reminder that life contained more than theft and betrayal. Sunday brought quiet preparation. Garrett reviewed his notes, organized evidence, prepared for week ahead. The investigation had crossed threshold. They knew someone was digging. The only question was how they'd respond. Monday morning arrived with crisp November air. Garrett dressed in his thrift store suit, kissed Avery goodbye, and headed downtown. Whatever came next, he was ready. At Lancaster, he settled into his cubicle and resumed work, building case one expense report at a time, following money trail deeper into conspiracy, getting closer to truth that would either save everything or destroy it. Week 4 at Lancaster brought deeper understanding of the financial maze. Garrett had been methodically working backward through 18 months of expense reports, and the pattern was undeniable. Dominic Fletcher's expenses had been modest at first, 1,000 here, 1,200 there, routed through Apex Marketing Solutions. But 8 months ago, the frequency had tripled, while amounts stayed carefully under the $1,500 threshold that would trigger board review. Garrett created a timeline on his personal laptop each evening after Avery went to bed. The escalation coincided exactly with when Victoria's board had announced the annual audit. Someone had known scrutiny was coming and had accelerated their theft, grabbing as much as possible before the window closed. But something else troubled him. He'd found 2 more ghost companies beyond Apex, Catalyst Strategic Services and Meridian Business Analytics. Both followed the same pattern. P.O. box addresses, no phone numbers, no online presence, invoices signed exclusively by Dominic. The total now approached $80,000, yet the sophistication suggested more than a junior executive acting alone. The shell companies had been registered properly, with legitimate-looking EINs that only revealed themselves as fraudulent under deep scrutiny. The accounting had been routed through systems designed specifically to bypass oversight. This level of planning required someone who understood Lancaster's financial infrastructure intimately. Tuesday morning of week 5, Kevin Lawson cornered Garrett in the hallway outside the restrooms. The VP's cologne arrived before his words. Working late a lot, Sullivan. Dedicated, or maybe struggling to keep up. The smile was razor sharp. I've been hearing interesting things, questions about expense reports, digging into vendor files. That's pretty far outside your job description for entry-level coordinator. Garrett kept his voice neutral. Just doing what I was hired to do, reconciling accounts for the audit. Right, the audit. Kevin leaned against the wall, blocking the path. Here's some advice from someone who survived corporate politics longer than 5 minutes. Be very careful whose toes you step on. Lancaster's a small company. Everyone knows everyone. Relationships matter. Loyalty matters. And newcomers who ask too many questions tend not to last long. Is that a threat? It's friendly advice. This company has layers you don't see, Sullivan. Power structures, alliances, history going back years, stumbling around without understanding the landscape. That's dangerous for everyone involved. He walked away before Garrett could respond, leaving the warning hanging. Kevin knew about the investigation, which meant either Dominic had told him, or Gregory, or Kevin was involved himself. The conspiracy was spreading wider than Garrett had imagined. That evening's meeting with Victoria took place in her apartment rather than the office, a luxury high-rise in Midtown with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Daniel Harper was already there, spreading documents across the dining table. Tell her, Daniel said, gesturing for Garrett to begin. He walked them through the timeline, the escalation pattern, the connection between audit announcement and theft acceleration. Victoria listened with the intense focus of someone absorbing implications. So Dominic knew the audit was coming. He panicked and grabbed as much as possible before getting caught. That's the obvious read, Daniel interjected. But here's what troubles me. Your car theft 3 months ago was sophisticated, multiple moving parts. Someone who knew your schedule, your assistant's vehicle, the restaurant location. That takes planning beyond a panicked embezzler. Daniel pulled out a photograph, security footage from a parking garage. This is from 2 weeks before your car was stolen. Dominic Fletcher meeting with someone at Renaissance Center parking structure. Downtown, middle of the day, very public but anonymous. The image was grainy but clear enough. Dominic stood beside a luxury sedan talking to someone through the driver's window. The angle didn't show the other person's face, only an arm and expensive suit sleeve. I've been trying to identify the vehicle's owner. Registration comes back to a leasing company. The lessee is Apex Holdings Limited. The revelation shifted the room's energy. Not Dominic working alone, but meeting with someone connected to the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the larger conspiracy. Did you get a better angle? Anything showing who Dominic was meeting? Daniel pulled out another photobomb. Traffic camera footage showing the sedan leaving the parking structure. The driver's face was partially visible through the windshield. Older male, distinctive silver hair. Garrett's chest tightened. He'd seen that profile before. That particular shade of gray. That posture. Recognition fought against impossibility. Victoria's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips, hand beginning to shake. That can't be. Gregory Caldwell, Daniel confirmed. Your CFO, the man who helped build Lancaster from nothing. He's meeting with Dominic Fletcher near a vehicle registered to the same shell company receiving stolen funds. The silence was deafening. Victoria set down her coffee with exaggerated care, as if worried about breaking something. Her face had gone pale, emotions cycling through denial and comprehension. Gregory's been with me from the beginning, before the beginning. When I was living in my car, he believed in my business plan. He helped structure my first loans. He built the entire financial infrastructure, which gave him access to everything, Garrett said quietly. Complete knowledge of every system, every approval process, every oversight mechanism. He'd know exactly where the blind spots were, how to route payments without triggering flags, how to bypass his own security protocols. Victoria stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Her reflection showed someone struggling to maintain composure. This doesn't make sense. Gregory makes excellent money, six-figure salary, profit sharing, benefits. Why steal? Why betray? Her voice cracked. I trusted him completely. Daniel's expression held professional sympathy. I've been investigating financial crimes for 15 years. Money's rarely the only motive. Sometimes it's resentment. The CFO who built the infrastructure but watches someone else get all the glory. The psychology landed like accusation. Victoria spun from the window. I always gave Gregory credit. He's CFO. He has authority, respect, substantial compensation. I know. Daniel's voice gentled. I'm not saying it's rational, but people construct narratives. They decide they've been wronged, that they deserve more, that taking what they're owed is justified. And if Gregory's been planning this from the beginning, 2 years, maybe longer, he's had time to build elaborate justification. Garrett thought about the stairwell confrontation, Gregory's barely contained anger, the speech about building Lancaster brick by brick while newcomers received unearned trust. The CFO hadn't been protecting Victoria. He'd been protecting his operation, threatened by an outsider who might uncover years of careful theft. The offshore accounts opened 26 months ago, Garrett said slowly. That's 4 months before the embezzlement started showing up in expense reports. Gregory was setting up infrastructure first. Shell companies, offshore accounts, documentation that looked legitimate. Then he brought in Dominic, either as partner or patsy, to handle the visible theft while Gregory stayed clean. Victoria's voice had steadied, anger replacing shock. But the car robbery, that was designed to humiliate me, to make me look incompetent. Daniel pulled out another document, corporate filings. 3 months ago, Velocity Marketing made an informal acquisition offer. Your board rejected it, but the conversation started. Someone inside Velocity contacted someone inside Lancaster to discuss terms. You think Gregory's been negotiating to sell the company? I think he's been deliberately devaluing it. Create chaos, make you look unreliable, tank confidence, then facilitate a hostile takeover at a fraction of true value. Velocity buys Lancaster cheap. Gregory gets a golden parachute and probably a VP position, plus whatever he's stolen from offshore accounts. The comprehensive betrayal settled over the room. Not just theft, but sabotage. Systematic destruction of everything Victoria had built, orchestrated by the person she'd trusted most. Victoria's hands curled into fists. Do we have enough for the police? We have circumstantial evidence and suspicious patterns. We don't have proof of Gregory's direct involvement. No paper trail connecting him to the ghost companies beyond that one meeting. A good lawyer would shred this in court. Daniel's honesty was brutal. We need more. Documentation showing Gregory controls Apex Holdings. Wire transfer records. Something concrete. Then we get it. Victoria's voice had gone cold. We confront Dominic, offer him a deal, testify against Gregory in exchange for reduced charges. That's dangerous, Garrett warned. If we tip our hand before we have enough evidence, Gregory could destroy records, transfer money, disappear. So what do you suggest? Garrett met her gaze. I get proof. Gregory doesn't know I have external backups. Doesn't know I've been building a case outside the network. He thinks the computer attack worked. I use that. I find the connection between Gregory and the offshore accounts. Whatever you need for prosecution. That puts you at risk. I'm already at risk. Gregory already threatened me. Dominic's already watching. I'm already in this. His voice hardened. Might as well finish it. Victoria studied him for a long moment, some private calculation happening behind her eyes. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but carefully. And if things get dangerous, you pull back. They spent another hour planning strategy. Garrett would continue the surface investigation while searching for Gregory's connection to the shell companies. Daniel would track the Velocity Marketing angle. Victoria would maintain appearances, acting unaware while quietly preparing the board. Leaving Victoria's apartment, stepping into cold November night, Garrett felt the weight of what he'd agreed to. Investigating Dominic had been relatively safe, but targeting the CFO, someone with decades of experience and extensive resources, that crossed into genuinely dangerous territory. His phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Avery asleep, leftover chicken in fridge, don't work too late. The simple kindness steadied him. He'd figure out how to prove Gregory's guilt. Had to. Because failure meant losing the joy that had given his daughter stability, meant disappointing Victoria who'd taken an impossible chance, meant watching corruption win. The next Saturday brought clearer skies and Avery's soccer practice at Roosevelt Park. Garrett stood on the sideline with other parents, hands in jacket pockets against the chill, watching his daughter weave between orange cones with improving skill. A familiar voice spoke beside him. She's really good. Natural athlete. Victoria stood there in jeans and a navy pea coat, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, looking nothing like the CEO who commanded boardrooms. Avery spotted her and waved frantically, nearly tripping over the ball. You mentioned practice times. Hope it's okay I came. They watched in comfortable silence as the coach set up drills. Avery played with fierce determination, positioning herself well, making smart decisions. When she successfully completed a difficult drill, Victoria clapped enthusiastically. You're doing an amazing job with her. The compliment landed awkwardly. Garrett never felt like he was doing enough, perpetually aware of all the ways he fell short. Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping things together. That's parenting. Anyone who says otherwise is lying. Victoria kept her eyes on the field. My parents divorced when I was 8. Dad disappeared, just gone one day, no explanation. Mom worked 3 jobs trying to keep us fed. I remember her coming home at midnight, sleeping 4 hours, then heading out again. Avery made another good play and Victoria cheered again. I built Lancaster because I never wanted to feel that powerless again. Never wanted to depend on someone who could vanish. Her voice went quiet. But watching you with Avery, I think maybe I focused on the wrong kind of power. You have something I've been chasing my whole life. What's that? Family, love, purpose beyond profit margins. She finally looked at him directly. I'm 38 years old. I have a company worth millions. I can buy almost anything. And I'm so lonely I gave my phone number to a stranger at a bus stop because for 30 seconds someone saw me as a person instead of a transaction. The vulnerability surprised him. This version of Victoria Brennan felt more real than the CEO persona. Practice ended. Avery ran over, face flushed and happy, immediately attaching herself to Victoria's side. Did you see my footwork? Coach said I'm really improving. I saw, you're getting so strong. Victoria's transformation was instantaneous, warm, engaged, the loneliness hidden behind genuine interest. Can you come to lunch with us? Please. We're going to the diner. Garrett started to offer Victoria an escape, but she was already nodding. I'd love to, if that's okay with your dad. At the diner, Avery monopolized conversation, telling Victoria about school and friends and the chapter book they were reading. Victoria listened with complete attention, asking questions, laughing at 7-year-old humor. Over coffee, while Avery colored on her kids' menu, Victoria told the story Garrett had heard pieces of but never complete. The economic collapse after college, the car she lived in, the library computer where she built her first client presentations, the gym membership for showers. She'd saved $500 and bought a laptop at a pawn shop, taught herself web design and marketing through free online courses, landed her first client through relentless cold calling. I slept in that car for 6 months, in winter, in Detroit. Her voice carried the weight of survival. There were nights I thought I'd freeze. Nights I was so hungry I couldn't sleep. Nights I wanted to give up. Avery had stopped coloring, listening with wide eyes. What made you keep going? Victoria considered the question seriously. I was tired of being afraid, tired of depending on people who left. I decided being uncomfortable temporarily was better than being vulnerable forever. She looked at Garrett, something complicated in her expression. But there's a plan. I'm good at business. I can walk into a room and command respect. What I'm not good at is trust, connection, letting people close enough to hurt me. Her smile turned sad. You build walls to protect yourself, and then one day you realize you're living in a prison you constructed. Avery reached across the table, small hand patting Victoria's. You don't have to be lonely. You can be friends with us. The simple offer made Victoria's eyes glisten. She blinked rapidly, composing herself. I'd like that very much. They lingered another hour, conversation drifting to safer topics. Eventually the check came. Reality reasserted itself. Outside the diner, Avery hugged Victoria goodbye with unconscious affection. Thank you, Victoria said quietly to Garrett, for letting me crash your Saturday. Any time, really. Driving home, Avery chattering from the passenger seat, Garrett caught himself smiling. The investigation, the threats, the uncertainty remained. But for a few hours, they'd been 3 people sharing lunch, building something that felt like connection. Week 6 brought the breakthrough he'd been searching for. Working late Tuesday evening, most staff gone, it was quiet, Garrett had been cross-referencing vendor registration numbers when he noticed something. Apex Marketing Solutions had an EIN that ended in 4472. Out of curiosity, he pulled up Gregory's Personal Consulting LLC, filed years ago for tax purposes. It ended in 4468, 4 numbers apart. Lines were assigned sequentially within geographic regions and time windows, which meant both entities had been registered around the same time, in the same location, probably by the same person. He pulled incorporation records from Michigan's business registry. Gregory's LLC had been filed in Wayne County on March 15th, 3 years ago. He expanded the search to show all registrations in Wayne County for that week. There, March 17th, 2 days later, Apex Marketing Solutions, registered agent, Sheffield Legal Services, a corporate filing firm in Dearborn, the same firm that had registered Gregory's LLC. Garrett's hands trembled as he documented everything. Still circumstantial, but getting closer. The connection was there. Just needed one more piece to make it irrefutable. Wednesday evening, working late again, Garrett heard voices from the conference room down the hall. Muffled but heated. He approached quietly, recognizing the voices, Gregory and Dominic. Through the partially open door, he could see them. Gregory was clearly angry, pointing finger, voice low and intense. Dominic looked defensive, hands up in placating gesture. They were arguing about something, the body language suggesting partnership under strain. Then they spotted him. The door yanked open. Dominic forced a smile. Garrett, still here, that's dedication. Just catching up on work. The computer crash set me back. Gregory's cold stare said nothing, but his presence was a silent threat. He brushed past Garrett in the hallway, shoulder check that was clearly intentional. Thursday brought the text Garrett had been hoping for. Daniel Harper found something important. Same place, tomorrow 9 a.m. Friday morning at Astoria Bakery, Daniel spread new documents across the table. I tracked down the paralegal who processed the Apex Marketing Solutions registration. Janet Morrison, she's retired now, lives in Livonia. I convinced her to check her personal records. He pushed forward a scanned intake form. Gregory Caldwell's signature, his handwriting on the registration paperwork. He personally filed to create Apex Marketing Solutions 3 years ago, paid cash for expedited processing. Victoria stared at the document, the final piece clicking into place. This is it. This proves he created the ghost company. Combined with the offshore accounts, the meeting with Dominic, the pattern of theft, yes, this is enough for prosecution. Daniel's satisfaction was evident. Garrett felt no triumph, only the weight of what came next. They had the evidence. Now they had to act. We move Monday, Victoria decided. I'll have Margaret Chen set up a meeting with Gregory, neutral location. We confront him with everything, give him one chance to cooperate before we involve the police. That's dangerous, Daniel warned. Cornered animals attack. I don't care. Victoria's voice had gone to ice. He's been stealing from me for years. He tried to destroy my company. He betrayed 15 years of trust. I want to see his face when he realizes he's been caught. Monday morning arrived with the weight of confrontation. But Sunday brought an unexpected complication. Garrett's doorbell rang mid-afternoon. He opened it to find 2 people he hadn't seen in over 2 years, Linda and Robert Morrison, Sarah's parents. We need to talk, Linda said, her voice carrying forced pleasantness that barely masked hostility. They sat stiffly in his living room while Avery played in her room, unaware. We've been thinking, Robert began, about Avery, about what's best for her. Garrett's stomach dropped. What are you talking about? We heard you got a new job, corporate work in the city, long hours. Linda's tone suggested accusation. That's wonderful, but it raises questions about Avery's care. Who's watching her? Is she getting proper attention? Eleanor Walsh, our neighbor, helps out. Avery's fine, she's thriving. A 7-year-old needs stability, consistency, 2 parents when possible. Robert pulled out papers. We've consulted with an attorney. We believe Avery would be better off in our care. We can provide a stable home, proper supervision, opportunities you can't afford. The papers were legal documents. Petition for custody, based on insufficient care and unsuitable living conditions. You can't take her. She's my daughter. We can try, Linda's voice went hard, for her own good. We love Sarah. This is what she would have wanted. Avery raised properly, not in some apartment with a father who's barely keeping it together. They left the papers and departed, their threat hanging in the air. Garrett sat in stunned silence, reading through the legal language. They had a case, not a strong one, but enough to force a hearing, to drag him through court, to threaten the stability he'd been desperately building. His phone rang, Victoria's name on the screen. Garrett, we have a problem. Board voted. I'm suspended pending investigation of the financial irregularities. Kevin presented fabricated evidence that I knew about the embezzlement. It's not enough to fire me, but enough to trigger review. What about Gregory? He abstained from the vote, didn't defend me, just sat there silent while Kevin led the attack. Her voice carried exhaustion. I'm losing my company, Garrett. That night, sitting alone at his kitchen table while Avery slept, Garrett stared at the custody papers beside his laptop. 2 crises converging. Gregory threatening his job, Sarah's parents threatening his daughter, Victoria losing her company, everything collapsing simultaneously. His phone buzzed. Text from Eleanor. Saw visitors earlier. Everything okay? He typed back. Will be. Thank you for caring. Eleanor's response came quickly. My late husband used to say, do the right thing even when it costs you everything, because living with yourself afterward is harder than any consequence. Garrett stared at the message. Do the right thing, even when it costs everything. He pulled up his files, reviewed the evidence against Gregory one more time. Tomorrow they'd confront the CFO. Tomorrow they'd either save Victoria's company or watch it burn. Tomorrow everything would change. But tonight Garrett made a promise to himself. Whatever came next, whatever threats materialized, he'd see this through. For Victoria, who'd given him a chance. For Avery, who deserved a father willing to fight. For Sarah, whose memory demanded justice and integrity. The investigation had cost him safety and stability. The confrontation ahead might cost him everything else. But walking away would cost something more valuable. His ability to look his daughter in the eye and tell her that doing the right thing mattered. That courage meant facing fear. That sometimes the most important battles were the ones you couldn't afford to lose. Gregory Caldwell had spent 2 years building an elaborate theft operation. He'd underestimated a factory worker with an associate degree in desperate need. That mistake was about to cost him everything. The confrontation was scheduled for Monday morning at Margaret Chen's law office in Southfield, neutral territory where Gregory Caldwell couldn't control the environment or summon allies. Garrett arrived at 6:45 a.m., the borrowed conference room already occupied by Victoria, Daniel Harper, and Margaret herself, a 60-year-old attorney with steel gray hair pulled back in severe bun and the sharp eyes of someone who'd spent decades navigating corporate warfare and emerged victorious more often than not. Daniel spread evidence across the polished mahogany table, photographs printed on glossy paper, bank statements highlighted in yellow, registration forms with telltale signatures circled in red, timelines constructed with prosecutor's precision. Margaret reviewed everything with meticulous attention, occasionally making notes on a legal pad in handwriting so small and precise it looked like calligraphy. This is sufficient for criminal charges, she announced after 20 minutes of silence. Embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, possibly racketeering if we can prove sustained criminal enterprise. But prosecution takes time, months, potentially years. Gregory Caldwell has resources to mount expensive defense, hire expert witnesses, drag this through appeals. She looked at Victoria directly. There's an alternative. We confront him, offer a deal, full restitution, immediate resignation, cooperation with authorities in exchange for reduced charges or immunity. You recover your money, remove the threat, restore confidence to your board, all without years of litigation that will cost millions and destroy company morale. Victoria's expression had gone cold, the CEO mask fully deployed, stripped of anything resembling warmth or mercy. I want him destroyed. He didn't just steal from me. He tried to systematically ruin everything I built from nothing. He betrayed 15 years of trust, 15 years of partnership. He smiled to my face while planning my professional execution. I understand the desire for revenge, Margaret's voice stayed clinically neutral. But destruction has costs beyond the obvious. Legal fees, time diverted from running your business, negative publicity, board members questioning your judgment for not catching this sooner, competitors circling like sharks smelling blood. Is emotional satisfaction worth potentially destabilizing the company you've spent 15 years building? The question hung in air, heavy with implications. Victoria wrestled visibly with competing desires, the primal need for justice and retribution versus the cold strategic calculation of what best served Lancaster's interests. Finally, she spoke, voice flat with suppressed rage barely contained beneath professional veneer. Set up the confrontation. I want Gregory in a room where he can't run, can't call his lawyers, can't manufacture excuses or deflect blame. I want him sitting across from me while I lay out exactly what he's done and watch his face when he realizes his careful crime has been completely exposed. And I want Garrett there. He built this case piece by piece. He deserves to see it through to the end. Margaret made the call herself, using her authority as counsel to command rather than request. Mr. Caldwell, this is Margaret Chen representing Lancaster and Associates Marketing. We need you at my office immediately for an urgent matter regarding company finances and irregularities that have come to light. Who? This is not optional, not negotiable, not something you can delegate. If you're not physically present in my conference room within the hour, I will contact Detroit police and have you escorted here. Am I making myself clear? They waited in tense silence that felt like holding breath underwater. Victoria paced the conference room like caged animal, unable to sit still, the fury she'd been containing for months finally showing through corporate composure. Daniel reviewed notes one more time, checking details, preparing for interrogation. Garrett thought about Avery still asleep at home, about Eleanor Walsh, who'd agreed to watch her this morning, about the custody papers from Sarah's parents sitting on his kitchen counter like ticking bomb, about everything balanced precariously on the outcome of the next hour. Gregory Caldwell arrived 53 minutes later, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Garrett's monthly rent, irritation radiating from every movement of his body. His expression shifted dramatically when he entered the conference room and saw the assembled group. Victoria standing by the window with arms crossed, Daniel Harper with his ex-cop intensity, Garrett Sullivan, whose presence clearly wasn't expected, Margaret Chen radiating legal authority, and the evidence spread across the table like accusations made physical. What is this? His voice carried equal parts confusion and building anger. Margaret gestured to empty chair with clinical precision. Sit down, Mr. Caldwell. We have some things to discuss regarding your activities at Lancaster and Associates. I don't think so. I'm not participating in whatever ambush you've orchestrated without my attorney present. Sit down. Victoria's voice cut through the room like blade through silk, cold and sharp, and absolutely uncompromising. Or I pick up this phone right now and call the Detroit Police Department and have you arrested for embezzlement and fraud. Your choice, Gregory. Make it quickly. Gregory hesitated, decades of corporate experience calculating odds, measuring options, trying to find an angle or escape route. Then slowly, with visible reluctance, he took the seat. His gaze moved over the documents spread before him, and Garrett watched recognition dawn. Understanding that his careful crime had been uncovered, that his protections had failed, that the factory worker he'd threatened in a stairwell had somehow managed to expose years of elaborate theft. I don't know what you think you've found, but I can assure you, Janet Morrison remembers you, Gregory. Victoria's tone stayed deadly calm, the voice of prosecutor presenting irrefutable evidence. The paralegal at Sheffield Legal Services, who processed your registration of Apex Marketing Solutions 3 years ago. She kept meticulous personal records of every filing she handled during her career. She has your signature on the intake forms. She has your handwriting on the registration paperwork. She remembers you specifically because you paid cash for expedited processing and were very particular about making sure Sheffield Legal was listed as registered agent rather than your own name appearing on public documents. She can and will testify under oath that you personally established the shell company that was used to funnel stolen money from Lancaster. Gregory's face paled slightly, but he recovered fast, decades of corporate politicking providing armor. That proves absolutely nothing. I register companies occasionally for legitimate consulting work and side projects. That's completely legal and proper business practice. Then explain the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands receiving regular deposits from those ghost companies. Daniel Harper pushed forward bank statements and wire transfer records with movements precise as surgeon. Explain this meeting with Dominic Fletcher at the Renaissance Center parking structure near a vehicle registered to Apex Holdings Limited. Explain why expense reports signed exclusively by Dominic Fletcher bypass every normal approval chain. Approval chains you personally designed and implemented specifically to prevent fraud and embezzlement. This is pure speculation and circumstantial. We have $340,000 in trace theft over 26 months. Victoria leaned forward, hands flat on table, invading his space with controlled aggression. We have documentation of you negotiating with Velocity marketing executives to facilitate hostile takeover of Lancaster at undervalued price. We have evidence you orchestrated my car theft 3 months ago specifically to discredit me and create chaos. We have testimony from Dominic Fletcher, who's already agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for reduced charges, detailing your entire operation. We have enough evidence to send you to prison for 20 years minimum, Gregory. So stop the lies and tell me why. Why betray someone who trusted you completely? The silence stretched painfully, seconds feeling like minutes. Gregory's composure cracked gradually like ice under pressure, revealing something raw and bitter underneath. Resentment that had been festering for years, carefully hidden behind professional courtesy. You want to know why? His voice came out rough, stripped of corporate polish. I built this company's entire financial infrastructure from absolute nothing. When you were sleeping in your car eating peanut butter sandwiches, I was the one who believed in your business plan when every bank in Detroit laughed you out of their offices. I structured your first loans. I designed every system, every control, every process that allowed Lancaster to scale from one-person operation to multi-million-dollar firm. I created the infrastructure that made your success possible. And I compensated you extremely well for those contributions. Six-figure salary, substantial profit sharing, comprehensive benefits package, respect and authority. You got all the glory. Gregory's control shattered completely. Years of contained rage finally erupting. Every article in Crane's Detroit Business, every award from the Marketing Association, every profile piece. Victoria Brennan, brilliant self-made entrepreneur who built an empire from $500. Where was I in those stories? Mentioned in passing, if at all. Gregory Caldwell, CFO, who handles the financial operations. The boring numbers guy, the support staff. While you collected accolades and speaking fees and board positions, I was the invisible infrastructure. So you decided to steal from me because you felt underappreciated? Because you weren't getting enough public recognition? I took what I earned through 15 years of building something you systematically took credit for. Gregory's bitterness poured out unchecked now, toxic and corrosive. Velocity Marketing offered me $2 million cash and chief operating officer position in the merged entity. Real recognition, real appreciation for my contributions. I wasn't stealing. I was collecting back payment for years of being treated as replaceable while you became Detroit business royalty. Victoria's expression remained frozen, but Garrett saw the flash of pain beneath. The specific agony of discovering someone you trusted had constructed an elaborate narrative justifying betrayal. Then Victoria asked the question that made the entire room go silent, that shifted everything into different register of horror. Did you have anything to do with Sarah Sullivan's death? Garrett's heart stopped. The question came from nowhere. A bomb dropped into already explosive situation. Gregory's face went from flush to white, blood draining like someone had opened valve. What? No, I have no idea what you're... Sarah Sullivan was a social worker investigating child abuse at a daycare center 3 years ago. Daniel Harper's voice stayed level, delivering facts with prosecutorial precision. That daycare, Little Scholars Learning Center, was owned by a subsidiary of Hartwell and Sons Accounting, the firm where Garrett worked. Your consulting company provided financial restructuring services to Hartwell during their bankruptcy proceedings. Sarah Sullivan was scheduled to testify before a grand jury about systematic abuse she'd documented. Then her brakes failed on I-94 and she died in a single-vehicle collision. Daniel pushed forward more documents, phone records, financial transactions, business connections. The auto shop that supposedly repaired those brakes 2 weeks before her death, Brighton Auto Services in Dearborn, was owned by Patrick Brighton. You played golf with Patrick Brighton twice a month for the past 5 years. You recommended his shop to at least a dozen people in your professional network. We have your cell phone records showing you called Patrick Brighton 6 times in the 2 weeks before Sarah's accident, including one call at 11:47 p.m. the night before she died. Explain those calls, Gregory. Explain that timing. Gregory's face had gone from white to gray, hands trembling visibly on the table. Garrett couldn't breathe, couldn't process. The implications crashing over him in waves. Sarah hadn't died in random mechanical failure. Someone had killed her. Murdered her to silence a whistleblower, to protect child abusers, to eliminate a threat. And Gregory Caldwell had facilitated it. I want a lawyer. Gregory's voice was barely audible. All the rage and justification drained out, replaced by something closer to terror. I'm not saying another word without legal representation. You're going to need several lawyers. Margaret Chen stood, pulling out her phone with practiced movement. I'm calling the Detroit Police Department right now, Mr. Caldwell. You're going to sit in that chair quietly while we wait for their arrival. Any attempt to leave this room will be considered fleeing prosecution. Any attempt to contact anyone will be considered conspiracy and obstruction. Are we absolutely clear? Gregory nodded mutely, the fight draining out of him completely. He sat hunched in the chair, a man watching his carefully constructed life collapse in real time. All the planning and deception and calculated crime exposed under fluorescent conference room lights. Garrett couldn't look at him, couldn't bear to see the person who'd orchestrated Sarah's death, who'd destroyed his family for nothing more than covering up child abuse and protecting criminal associates, who'd stolen 3 years of his daughter's childhood because a social worker had tried to do her job and protect vulnerable children. The rage built in his chest, suffocating and absolute, demanding action that would only make everything infinitely worse. Victoria's hand found his under the table, squeezing gently. The gesture grounded him, pulled him back from the edge where violence seemed justified and necessary. The police arrived within 20 minutes. Two detectives from the white-collar crimes unit, who listened to Margaret Chen's presentation with professional attention, reviewed the evidence spread across the table, asked clarifying questions with practiced efficiency, and placed Gregory Caldwell under arrest. They read him his rights with movements so routine they could have been reciting grocery lists, cuffed him with practiced technique, led him out of the conference room toward a future that included prosecution and prison and permanent destruction of reputation. As they escorted him through the doorway, Gregory looked back once, not at Victoria, not at Daniel or Margaret, at Garrett. Their eyes met for 3 seconds that felt like eternity. "You've destroyed both of us, Sullivan," Gregory said, voice matter-of-fact rather than accusatory, simply stating what he believed to be truth. "The people who paid me to handle the Sarah situation, they won't let this investigation stand or expand. You've painted a target on your back, on your daughter's back. Was proving you're clever worth making your child vulnerable to people without conscience or limits?" Then he was gone, door closing behind the detectives, leaving that final threat hanging in the air like poison gas. Victoria moved to Garrett's side immediately, hand on his shoulder. "He's trying to scare you into backing down. Standard intimidation tactic. Don't listen to him." "Who paid him?" Garrett's voice came out hollow, scraped raw. "He said people paid him to handle Sarah. Who wanted my wife dead badly enough to order a murder?" "We'll find out. The DA's office will investigate thoroughly. Patrick Brighton's already cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for reduced charges. We'll get answers in justice. But those answers would take time. Weeks, months, possibly years of legal proceedings and investigation, while Garrett lived with the knowledge that his wife's death was murder, that powerful people somewhere had ordered her killed, that Gregory Caldwell was just the middleman in a larger conspiracy still mostly hidden. The rest of Monday blurred through police interviews and evidence transfer, official statements, and procedural formalities. Margaret Chen handled the legal coordination with efficiency born of decades of practice. Victoria managed phone calls to her board of directors, explaining that their chief financial officer had been arrested for embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder, that Lancaster's finances needed emergency review and restructuring, that she'd be working closely with prosecutors and implementing comprehensive reforms immediately. Garrett sat through multiple statements to detectives, recounting his investigations step by step, providing documentation of the financial crimes, answering questions about Sarah's work and her final days. They asked if she'd mentioned threats or expressed fear. He answered as honestly as possible, but 3 years of distance made memories uncertain, details fuzzy and unreliable. By 6 p.m., exhaustion had settled into Garrett's bones with weight of physical illness. Victoria drove him home rather than let him navigate public transportation in his current state, the luxury sedan feeling absurdly comfortable after months of buses and trains. "Take tomorrow off," she ordered as they pulled up outside Westwood Apartments. "Rest. Process everything. Be with Avery. You've done more than enough." "What about the board, the financial review?" "I'll handle it. You've given me everything I need to rebuild and move forward." She paused, hands still on the steering wheel, staring through the windshield. Garrett, what you did, what you uncovered and proved, you saved my company from complete destruction. More than that, you got justice for Sarah. That matters. That means something. It doesn't bring her back. No, nothing can. But at least now you know the truth instead of living with comfortable lie. At least the person responsible will face consequences. They sat in the car for a long moment, November darkness settling over the parking lot like heavy blanket, neither quite ready to end the conversation or face what came next. Finally, Garrett opened the door, stepping into cold air that felt cleansing after hours in climate-controlled offices. Thank you for driving me home. Anytime. Upstairs, Eleanor Walsh was reading to Avery in the living room, their voices creating domestic comfort that felt surreal after police stations and arrest warrants and revelations of murder. His daughter looked up as he entered, immediately reading the exhaustion in his face and body language. Are you okay, Daddy? He crossed the room and pulled her into a tight hug, holding on perhaps longer than necessary. I'm okay now. The weeks that followed brought controlled chaos that gradually resolved into new normal. Gregory's arrest made regional news. Prominent CFO of successful marketing firm charged with embezzlement and conspiracy to commit murder. Lancaster's board conducted emergency reviews, hiring external auditors to assess full extent of financial damage and implement new controls. Dominic Fletcher, confronted with overwhelming evidence and offered prosecutorial leniency, turned state's witness against Gregory, providing detailed testimony about the embezzlement scheme in exchange for reduced charges and probation instead of prison time. Garrett testified before the grand jury, walking them through his investigation with methodical precision, how he'd noticed the patterns, traced the ghost companies, connected Gregory to the shell corporations. Margaret Chen presented the financial documentation with prosecutor's skill. The indictment came down quickly, multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice. Gregory's bail was set impossibly high at $5 million. He'd await trial from Wayne County Jail. Victoria promoted Garrett to Director of Financial Operations with salary increased to $85,000 annually plus profit sharing and expanded benefits package. The board of directors approved unanimously, desperate to demonstrate swift action and renewed commitment to integrity. 3 months after Gregory's arrest, in late February, with winter finally loosening its grip on Detroit, the custody battle with Sarah's parents came to its inevitable conclusion. Margaret Chen represented Garrett at the hearing in Wayne County Family Court, presenting evidence of stable employment, adequate housing, strong support system, Avery's academic success, and emotional well-being. Victoria Brennan attended despite having no legal obligation, testifying eloquently about Garrett's character and parenting capabilities. But the turning point came when Linda Morrison took the witness stand for questioning. Under Margaret's careful interrogation, Linda's true motivations emerged with uncomfortable clarity. Not genuine concern for Avery's welfare, but deep-seated anger at Garrett for Sarah's death. Blame that had festered for 3 years, resentment that he'd somehow survived while their daughter hadn't. The judge, a woman in her 60s who'd presided over family court for 20 years, saw through the facade immediately. Mrs. Morrison, the judge said with carefully controlled patience, your daughter's death was a tragedy, but placing blame on Mr. Sullivan for circumstances beyond his control serves no purpose except to inflict pain. Your granddaughter needs stability and love, not to be caught in the middle of adults working through complicated grief. Petition denied. Garrett Sullivan retained full custody. Linda and Robert Morrison were granted supervised visitation rights twice monthly if they chose to exercise them. But the existential threat was over, dissolved by judge's ruling and legal precedent. Walking out of the courthouse into pale February sunshine, Garrett felt weight lift that he hadn't fully recognized he had been carrying. Margaret squeezed his shoulder. Go home, hug your daughter, build the life you deserve. Spring arrived with warming temperatures and new possibilities flowering alongside the trees. Avery's soccer team started their season with renewed energy and improved skills from winter training. One Saturday morning in late March, Garrett stood on the sideline at Roosevelt Park watching practice when Victoria appeared beside him carrying 2 cups of coffee from the good place downtown. Thought you might need this. They'd fallen into comfortable rhythm over the past months. Weekly dinners at various restaurants, Weekend outings to museums and parks, casual time together that felt increasingly less casual with each passing week. Avery had started calling her Aunt Victoria, and while the title carried no biological accuracy, emotionally it fit perfectly. Victoria had integrated into their small family with the naturalness of someone who'd been desperately missing exactly this kind of connection her entire adult life. After practice ended, they grabbed lunch at their usual diner, vinyl booths and laminated menus, unchanged since the 1970s. Avery monopolized conversation as always, telling Victoria about school and friends and upcoming science fair project. But during a lull while she colored enthusiastically on her kids' menu, Victoria spoke quietly across the table. Can I ask you something personal? Always. Do you ever think about dating again? About moving on from Sarah and maybe finding someone new? The question caught him off guard despite months of building toward this moment. Sometimes, more often lately if I'm honest, but it feels complicated, like I'd be betraying her memory or somehow being disloyal. Would she want you to be alone forever, to spend the rest of your life in grief? Garrett thought about Sarah, about the woman who dedicated her life to helping others and loving with fierce generosity. No, she'd be furious if I spent decades in grief instead of living fully. She used to say that love wasn't finite, that caring deeply for one person didn't diminish your capacity to care for others, that the heart expands rather than divides. What if you met someone who made it less complicated? Someone who understood your situation, who genuinely cared about Avery, who wanted to be part of your lives without trying to replace Sarah or pretend she never existed? The hypothetical felt decidedly less hypothetical with each word. Garrett looked at Victoria across the diner table, not as his boss or the CEO who'd given him impossible chance, but as a woman who'd spent months consistently showing up, who'd integrated herself into his life with genuine affection and commitment, who'd proven through repeated action that her interests transcended gratitude or professional obligation. That would be scary and complicated in new ways, and potentially wonderful. Yeah, Victoria's voice went soft. It would be. Later that afternoon, walking through the parking lot toward their cars, Avery running ahead to practice new soccer moves on empty pavement, Victoria stopped and turned to face Garrett directly. I know this is complicated. You're technically my employee, though honestly at this point you're more like my second-in-command and trusted partner. There's Avery to consider and your grief and the fact that I'm probably terrible at relationships because I've spent my entire adult life prioritizing business success over personal connection and vulnerability. Garrett waited, sensing she had more to say and needed space to work through it. But I need you to know, I haven't been this genuinely happy in years, maybe ever, if I'm completely honest. Being around you and Avery, spending time together, building something that feels like real family, it's everything I didn't know I was missing while I was busy constructing business empire. She took visible breath, gathering courage. I'm not asking for anything to change right this moment. I just needed you to understand that this matters to me, that you both matter to me, more than I know how to articulate properly. I know. Garrett stepped closer, closing the distance between them. I feel exactly the same way. Have been feeling it for weeks now, maybe longer. I just didn't know if this was mutual or if I was misreading everything. Not misreading. Victoria's smile carried relief. Definitely not misreading. They stood in the parking lot for another moment, afternoon sun breaking through lingering winter clouds. Avery practicing soccer 20 yards away, completely absorbed in her own world. Garrett reached for Victoria's hand, the touch tentative and electric simultaneously, crossing threshold that couldn't be uncrossed. This is probably going to be complicated. Definitely complicated. Victoria squeezed his hand gently. But maybe worth it anyway. Maybe the best things are always complicated. Yeah, maybe. Avery noticed eventually, stopping her practice to stare at them with 7-year-old perception that missed nothing. Are you holding hands? Yeah. Garrett met his daughter's gaze directly, letting her read truth in his expression. Is that okay with you? Avery considered this with appropriate seriousness, understanding somehow that important moments required thoughtful response. Does this mean Victoria is going to be my mom now? Victoria crouched to Avery's eye level with practiced grace. Not your mom, sweetheart. Nobody can replace your mom. She was special and wonderful and loved you more than anything in the entire world. But maybe if your dad and I keep spending time together and this keeps feeling right, maybe I could be someone who loves you too. Someone who wants to be in your life and be there for you. Would that be okay? Avery processed this carefully. Okay, but you have to come to all my soccer games and help with homework sometimes and make pancakes on Sunday mornings like Mom used to. I can do that. Victoria's eyes glistened with tears she was trying not to shed. I'd be honored to do all of that. The relationship developed slowly over the following months, both of them hyper-aware of the stakes and potential consequences. They didn't tell the Lancaster staff immediately, wanting to establish solid foundation before navigating workplace gossip and corporate politics. But they spent increasing time together. Dinners after work at restaurants ranging from casual to elegant, weekend outings to Belle Isle and the Detroit Institute of Arts, quiet evenings watching movies while Avery gradually fell asleep between them on the couch. 10 weeks after the parking lot conversation, on a warm May evening with spring finally establishing dominance, they took Avery to Belle Isle for an elaborate picnic. The Detroit Park sprawled across its island in the Detroit River, offering playgrounds and green spaces and views of the water. Avery ran ahead to explore while Garrett and Victoria walked slowly behind, hands intertwined in a way that had become natural rather than tentative. I've been thinking a lot about the future, Victoria said, about what we're building here and where it might lead. Okay? I'm terrible at taking things slow. It's fundamentally not in my nature. When I identify something I want, I pursue it aggressively until I have it or conclusively fail. She stopped walking, turning to face him directly with expression, mixing vulnerability and determination. But with you, with us, I'm trying very hard to be patient, to let things develop naturally, to not push too hard, too fast. She paused, gathering words. But I also need you to know, this isn't casual for me. This isn't some temporary thing until I get bored or distracted by work. When I commit to something, I commit completely with everything I have. And I'm committing to this, to you, to Avery, to building something real and lasting. Garrett's chest tightened with emotion he'd forgotten he could feel. I'm committing too, completely and permanently. I'm just scared of getting this wrong somehow, of making mistakes that hurt Avery if things don't work out the way we hope. We won't let that happen. Victoria's certainty carried the same conviction she brought to business decisions. We'll protect this, fight for it, make it work even when things are difficult, because what we have is worth protecting. They kissed there under May trees just beginning to leaf out, tentative and tender simultaneously, Avery's distant laughter providing perfect soundtrack. The kiss lasted long enough to feel significant, to mark clear transition from possibility to genuine commitment. Avery noticed when she ran back, face breaking into delighted grin. You kissed. Does this mean you're officially boyfriend and girlfriend now? Yes, Victoria answered before Garrett could speak. If that's okay with you. It's very okay. Can I tell my friends at school? Can Victoria come to Parent Day? Can we? One thing at a time, sweetie, Garrett said, pulling his daughter close. But yes to all of that, eventually. 2 months later, on a humid July evening, Victoria invited them to move into her house in Grosse Pointe. I have 3 bedrooms sitting mostly empty and unused. You could keep your apartment if you want to maintain independence. But having you both there with me, waking up together, being actual family instead of just dating, I'd really like that. The offer came with financial implications that worried Garrett despite his improved circumstances. He was making good money now, but Victoria's wealth existed on a completely different scale. The house in Grosse Pointe had probably cost more than he'd earned in a decade. I don't want to be a kept man. Don't want Avery growing up thinking I latched onto you because of money. You latched onto me for health insurance, Victoria reminded him with gentle humor. The money came later as consequence of your own capabilities. But I understand the concern. So here's compromise. You pay rent. Fair market value for 3-bedroom apartment in less expensive neighborhood. We'll deposit it into joint savings account specifically for Avery's future college expenses. That way you're contributing financially, maintaining your independence, but the money stays useful for your family. The compromise satisfied his pride while acknowledging practical reality. They moved in August, Avery getting her own room for the first time in her life, space to spread out and decorate and exist as something beyond extension of her father's cramped quarters. The house transformed rapidly under their occupation. Victoria's minimalist corporate aesthetic gave way to Avery's artwork covering the refrigerator, school projects scattered across kitchen counters, soccer gear living by the back door. They established comfortable routines. Sunday morning pancakes that Victoria learned to make through trial and error, and YouTube tutorials. Thursday evening movie selections that Avery controlled with benevolent dictatorship. Weekend yard projects teaching both Garrett and Victoria the basics of lawn maintenance neither had needed before. In October, exactly 1 year after Garrett had given his last $18 to a stranger at a bus stop, Victoria pulled him aside after Avery went to bed in her new room. "I need to tell you something important." Her serious tone sent worry spiking through him. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, completely opposite of wrong, actually." She took his hands in hers. "I've been thinking extensively about what I want long-term. Not just career success or business growth or any of that, but actual life success. Family, stability, deep connection that lasts beyond quarterly earnings and annual reviews." She met his eyes directly with characteristic intensity. "I want to marry you, Garrett. I want to legally adopt Avery so she's officially my daughter in every sense. I want us to be a real family, bound together by choice and law and permanent commitment, not just people who love each other but aren't officially connected." His heart hammered against his ribs. Marriage, adoption, permanent legal and emotional bonds. The concept felt enormous after years of instability. "You're sure about this? You've only known Avery for a year. We've only been officially together for 6 months. That's not very long to make life-altering decisions. I spent 20 years alone, Garrett. 2 decades building walls and protecting myself and prioritizing career success over human connection. I know exactly what empty success looks like, what it feels like to have millions in the bank but nobody to share it with. Nobody who cares if you come home at night." She squeezed his hands. "And I know what happiness feels like now. This, you and Avery and the life we're building, this is happiness. Real, sustainable, meaningful happiness. I don't need more time to be certain of something I feel in my bones. What if I'm not ready yet? What if I need more time to? Then we wait as long as you need. I'm not pressuring you or giving ultimatums. I just wanted you to know where I am, what I want, so you can think about whether you want the same things." Garrett pulled her close, breathing in her perfume, feeling solid reality of her presence. "I want exactly the same things. I'm just scared of believing I can actually have them without everything collapsing again. Scared that something will happen to take this away, like everything else good in my life has been taken." "Well, I'm not going anywhere." Victoria's voice carried absolute certainty. "You're permanently stuck with me now. For better or worse, richer or poorer, all of that traditional commitment language. Those are wedding vows. Consider it practice for when you're ready to say them officially." 2 months later, in early December, at Belle Isle Park, where they'd been walking regularly, Garrett proposed. He'd been planning for weeks, saving money from his salary increase, working with a jeweler downtown to design something meaningful rather than expensive. A simple platinum band with 3 small diamonds representing Garrett, Victoria, and Avery. He got down on one knee in the pavilion where they'd spent summer afternoons, while Avery bounced with barely contained excitement beside him, having been trusted with the secret for exactly 24 hours. "Victoria Brennan, a year ago you appeared at my door with 5 black SUVs and impossible offers. You gave me a chance when nobody else would have considered it. You saw potential in a factory worker with an associate degree and $18 to his name. You loved my daughter like she was your own from almost the first moment." His voice wavered with emotion. "You made me believe that good things could happen to broken people, that second chances existed, that building new life on the ruins of old tragedy was possible rather than just fantasy." He opened the ring box, simple blue velvet holding the small symbol of enormous commitment. "Will you marry me?" Victoria dropped to her knees in the grass, not waiting for proper positioning or protocol. Yes, absolutely yes. Forever and always yes. Avery tackled them both with enthusiasm, the three of them collapsing in laughing heap on the grass, while nearby ducks scattered and passing joggers smiled at the obvious joy. The ring fit perfectly. Garrett had gotten her size by secretly measuring other jewelry she owned, planning ahead with characteristic attention to detail. They married 3 months later in early March in small ceremony at the Grosse Pointe House, close friends and family only. Margaret Shine officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for this occasion. Avery served as flower girl, taking her responsibility with utmost seriousness, scattering rose petals with mathematical precision down the makeshift aisle through their living room. Victoria wore simple white dress, elegant without ostentation. Garrett wore new suit properly fitted instead of thrift store approximation. When Margaret asked for vows, they both had prepared words carefully crafted over weeks. Garrett spoke first, voice thick with emotion, barely contained. You saved me when I was drowning. Not just with a job or money, but with hope, with the fundamental belief that good people still existed in the world, that kindness mattered, that doing the right thing could actually lead somewhere better instead of just more suffering. You gave my daughter a mother's love when I thought she'd never experience that again. You made me believe in second chances and the possibility of building something lasting from broken pieces. Victoria's tears flowed freely, no attempt to hide them. I built a successful company, but lived in emotional emptiness. I measured achievement in dollars and market share while completely missing everything that actually mattered. You taught me that the richest people aren't those with biggest bank accounts. They're the ones who have someone who'll stay when the money disappears, who choose you every single day, who build family not through biological obligation, but through deliberate love and commitment. The exchange of rings felt sacred despite the informal setting. Margaret pronounced them married with genuine warmth, and Avery cheered loudly enough to probably be heard across Grosse Pointe. The reception was small and perfect. Dinner at the house, champagne and sparkling cider for Avery, Eleanor Walsh telling gently embarrassing stories about young Garrett from when she'd been his neighbor at Westwood Apartments, Daniel Harper offering toast about how rarely his investigations ended with weddings instead of prison sentences. 15 months after the wedding, Victoria appeared in the doorway of Garrett's home office on a Tuesday afternoon, carrying something behind her back, expression mixing nervousness and excitement. I have news, important news. He looked up from quarterly financial reports. Good news or concerning news? Very good news, I hope. She brought her hands forward, revealing positive pregnancy test. Extremely good news. Garrett's brain needed several seconds to process. Pregnant, baby. Their family expanding beyond the three of them to include entirely new life. You're completely sure? Doctor confirmed it this morning, about 8 weeks along, due date in early November. He stood, crossed the room, pulled her into a careful hug, mindful of new fragility. That's amazing. That's incredible. How are you feeling? Are you okay? Do you need to sit down? I'm fine, slightly nauseous in mornings, but otherwise perfectly good. She studied his face carefully. You're happy about this, right? We talked about maybe eventually having a child together, but this is sooner than we planned. And if you're not ready, I'm thrilled, completely and totally thrilled. He kissed her forehead. Avery's going to absolutely lose her mind with excitement. They told Avery that evening, sitting her down in the living room with appropriate ceremony. Their daughter's eyes went progressively wider as Victoria explained that she was going to be a big sister, that there would be a baby in the house around Thanksgiving. A real baby that I can help take care of and teach things to? A real baby who will need a very responsible and loving big sister to show them how the world works. Avery's shriek of pure joy probably violated multiple noise ordinances. That Saturday afternoon, they walked through Belle Isle again, the park where they'd first acknowledged their relationship, where Garrett had proposed, where so many important moments had unfolded. Avery ran ahead as always, practicing soccer moves on open grass. Victoria's hand rested protectively on her still flat stomach, already maternal in ways that would have seemed impossible 2 years ago. Hard to believe this all started at a bus stop with you counting change, with $18 and a complete stranger's desperation meeting my own. Victoria smiled. If someone had told me that night where I'd end up, married, pregnant, living in Grosse Pointe with a stepdaughter I love more than I knew was possible, I would have thought they were absolutely insane. Same. If someone had told me I'd end up as director of financial operations at a multi-million-dollar company, married to the CEO, living in a house I couldn't have afforded in wildest dreams, with a baby on the way, I would have laughed bitterly and gone back to counting my $18. They watched Avery play, both contemplating the sheer improbability of the path that had led to this moment. Gregory Caldwell was in prison serving 25 years. Patrick Brighton had cooperated with prosecutors, leading to multiple additional arrests in the child abuse ring that had ordered Sarah's death. Justice hadn't brought Sarah back. Nothing could accomplish that miracle. But it had created space for new life, new love, new family built carefully on the foundation of tragedy and loss. Avery ran back to them, breathless and grinning. "Can we get ice cream? I'm starving." "Of course, sweetheart," Victoria said, taking her hand. "My treat as always." They walked toward the parking lot, three people who'd chosen to become family about to become four, the improbability of their stories still striking Garrett in quiet moments. How a single decision at a bus stop, one moment of choosing kindness over self-preservation, had cascaded into everything that followed. When you give someone your last dollar while you're both drowning, you're not performing charity or expecting reward. You're recognizing yourself in another person's desperate struggle, admitting that survival is hard for everyone, acknowledging that sometimes the bravest thing possible is helping a stranger even when you can barely help yourself. That moment of grace, that refusal to look away from someone else's pain despite carrying crushing weight of your own, that's where transformation begins, where impossible connections form, where families are built from choice rather than biology. $18 couldn't buy much in practical terms, but apparently offered to the right person at the perfect moment with authentic heart, it could buy everything that actually mattered. Not because the universe rewards good deeds with fairy tale endings, but because human connection matters more than anything. Because seeing someone else's struggle and choosing compassion despite your own desperation is the foundation of every meaningful relationship, every genuine family, every life worth living beyond mere survival. They drove home through Detroit streets as dusk settled, past the bus stop on Washington Avenue where Impossible Story had begun, past Westwood Apartments where Garrett had once lived paycheck to paycheck, past the Fisher Building where Victoria had given him a chance nobody else would have considered. The route traced their journey from desperation to hope, from isolation to connection, from $18 to everything that mattered. And in the back seat, Avery hummed contentedly, completely secure in the knowledge that her family was whole and growing, that good things could last, that sometimes the people who seemed to have nothing turned out to have everything worth having.